Well, good morning, everybody. In today's video, I kind of got three big questions I'm looking for answers to, and that is going to be, first, how is this Pacific jet extension really going to play out? We've kind of made a big deal about it over the last couple of weeks and what it could do in terms of temperature transition and also the transition and the pattern here across North America. So that second question will be about the temperature transition. When do we see this mild air that's going to flood across the country kind of begin to move away? And my final questions are going to be more about international weather. I've got quite a bit for you at the end today about both South America and Australia. I've been talking over a map of the last 24 hours of total accumulated precipitation, and the first of a couple of different surges of moisture coming around this big area of high pressure sitting here is shown to you in the mid part of the country. Now, a lot of this was ice in this area, and we're still going to expect to see more kind of winter weather mix today, although a lot more warmer air has since invaded into this region, kind of taking that ice threat away from the southern parts. I'll tell you where I think it's going to be here in a few moments. But I want to point out, if you come over to the west, just take a look at down here in Southern California. We had a low that kind of rolled through this area, bringing in some incredibly intense precipitation, and maybe you saw some of the videos on the news last night about the flooding down here in San Diego. So this got all the way down to the most southern parts of California, delivering in some places very, very heavy rainfall. It's important to note that a lot of Southern California is desert, right? So this is an area that when we do receive rainfall amounts, even though these colors don't indicate huge totals, it doesn't matter. The topography, the landscape, those kind of things can quickly create major flooding scenarios. And remember, for the last month, actually since December the 1st, these areas down here have been missed almost entirely by the proper jet stream flow, that subtropical jet stream flow, to kind of hit this region. Now that's going to change, and I'll be talking about that quite a bit. But what I do want to see change in this forecast is there's this area that as of late, and continuing into the Canadian prairie here, that has just missed. And the concern is it's going to continue to miss. I'm talking Montana, Wyoming, parts of the Dakotas, the Canadian prairie. While we bring in extremely heavy rainfall into this area, it's going to press on off to the east, and we're going to watch snow melts, giving us flooding issues in this area. So for the majority of the country, the discussion is going to be about either new water being added by precipitation or flooding that could be potentially resulting from snow melt. The only slivers that are going to get missed out, I think, are going to be mainly right up here into this section of kind of the northern plains. Okay, temperatures this morning about 6 a.m. have already started a major recovery. I mean, if you take a look at this same map a week ago on the 13th, these numbers were in like the negative single digits. Here we are now with early morning temperatures already breaking through that freezing line. So the warm air advection doing its work, and because of that, the cold ground, because there's snow on it, has, first of all, a high evaporation rate, but right next to the ground, okay, you're getting the effect of the contact with the cold snow, and it's creating a very close layer to the surface that is saturated. What I mean by that is the cold snow is forcing the air to be cold right next to the surface, saturating the air, and it's creating a lot of fog. And this fog is, I think, our most common weather risk today, a huge corridor in through here of fog, but we'll pay attention to the risk of flooding here. We still have the winter weather advisories that stretch from parts of Missouri and Iowa all the way into, Vermont, parts of Massachusetts and Connecticut as well. So we'll keep an eye on how that's going to play out. But the story will be kind of rewritten on this pattern in the western United States before anywhere else. So just taking a look at it. Here's the winds today. So we can see as this resets, there's just a lot of southerly wind, right? It's coming around this high here. It's coming off the high plains there. It's getting into Canada. That is a warm wind direction. And the question will be, how do we transition the winds in the Pacific to really target the west to bring in what could be quite a bit of moisture over the coming days and weeks? So I thought we'd just start off with some high-res forecasts just to look at the models and see what they're suggesting, and then I'll get into that pattern shift. So I'm beginning this morning at 8 a.m., and here goes the first surge. I was looking at the OBS this morning. There was freezing rain in this part of Iowa, stretching along the Illinois-Wisconsin border up towards Chicago, but it had converted almost all over to rain last night as the warmer air came through. So as we watch, here comes the next surge out of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois by tomorrow morning. Just look at that. Second surge kind of pushing into that area. And I know you kind of see a lot of just like freckled, what looks like ice in this area. This is just some of the feedback in the model. When it's got a very saturated lower level of the atmosphere, I think this is one of the feedbacks we get. So I don't look at this and assume there's going to be freezing drizzle everywhere here. But the system that went through California did put more moisture into Arizona. We'll continue to do that throughout the day today. And then it'll become a part of this push of moisture that's going to move to the east throughout the day on Wednesday, getting in toward Thursday and eventually into Friday. There is some snow following this as that next frontal boundary came through the Pacific Northwest that gets into parts of Utah, out of Idaho, and toward kind of the Four Corner states here. But overall, this isn't going to be the right pattern to be talking about a lot of snow until we get the full surge of moisture coming off the Pacific and what that might do to the Sierra Nevada mountains. So we've got a lot to be watching here coming in from the west. So here's the story, all right? We kind of hinted at this over the last several days, but I think I got a better picture of it today. Throughout the remainder of this week, the pattern across North America goes a bit flat. And when I say flat, I just mean uneventful. And what happens is by the end of this week, we end up taking the jet stream from Japan, actually from China through Japan, all the way north of Hawaii. And what I've just kind of outlined for you there, that is an average speed of almost 200 miles an hour. This is in nautical miles per hour. So multiply that by 1.15 and you have miles per hour. So this is incredibly fast wind. That is a jet extension. Now what's going on here is it's splitting. Can you kind of see it breaking up into a piece there and there? And every time that split happens, we lose the precipitation signal and we bring in drier air and we bring in a lot warmer air. And we've been talking a lot about that. But this is through Sunday the 28th, getting out there toward the 29th and the 30th, right there. We start to see the far eastern side of that jet extension nearing California, which means as we get into week 2, we could start to already see the heavier precipitation begin to get added into California. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I've watched this all wet season long since October, and I will tell you that I feel as though the models have been over-promising on California rainfall, especially in the southern half of the state. We keep seeing these extensions that happen, like we had one in December. And what ended up materializing out of it was far less than what happened. Even on 10-day forecasts, we show how much we think is going to be there, and sometimes it comes in less. So is there anything different about this? There is. The net position of this is a bit stronger, and it's a bit farther to the north. And why that's important is because as we start the new month, this is February 1st, all right, we're still in the middle of this kind of, boring flow pattern across a big section of the country while California takes the kind of front end of this jet extension. But what I'm seeing here is that once we get out there toward Groundhog's Day and then play toward the 3rd and 4th and 5th, I'm watching ridging build in this direction, ridging being maintained in this direction, and flow coming in and making the turn, which means once we get to that time period, it's really going to open things up as the jet retracts to the hope of getting some colder air back in February, and then also the return of moisture. Now, I use the word hope because when we can get multiple shots of really cold air coming through the center part of the United States, what this is good for is it's good for our soil health overall. It's good for compaction. It's good for reinitiating a freeze cycle. It's very good for the setup for snow, which we kind of think of just stored moisture. It's kind of slow release moisture, if you will, and it's needed. The fact that the North American growing areas have a big and long duration winter is part of the reason for the success of the growing ability in this area. So we do need another shot of cold air. Just thinking about the 2024 growing season, we need it. But I'll tell you, by the 5th and 6th, this is everything you could want. Look at that. The jet retracts, but we still get that component. And while I don't like what this means for the northern plains, I do like what it means for a lot of other regions. So I want to show it to you by looking at a 5-day sliding window of precipitation anomalies. So we just kind of eyeball this graphic as an idea to see who's wet. Now, we've been discussing this now for a while, the really, really wet conditions that are going to be expected for the remainder of this week here. And then the Northwest gets targeted because of the split flow. So it comes around, so that leaves California, parts of the Southwest out. Storm systems, actually, they try to go into British Columbia, but they're going to bring in wetter weather into the Northwest. Now watch this. This is a 5-day sliding window. So as we approach the end of the month, the last 5 days of this month, you see we have the exiting wetter weather east, the wet conditions coastal North California into Oregon, Washington, and the rest of the country gets warm and kind of boring. Now watch what happens as they begin the new month. The drier air exits as the jet hits the west. And then here we go. Ready? 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. See that? Jet stream dips south here, opens up like this. There's a ridge supporting the colder air that could come in on the back side of this. The ridge that moves toward Alaska also helps with colder air, and we just set this up for the midsection of the country to really be getting a lot of moisture. Now, this is 15 days out. This is the last 5 days, day 10 through 15. Up until that point, there's not going to be a whole lot of activity in here after the wave comes through, the one we've already talked about. So what does that look like? Well, here's your next 7 days. And again, I'm just going to draw the same shape I've drawn so many times here, right? There's this, sorry about that. There's this area that is completely left out of the flow right now. But I do like the WPC's representation on total precipitation, finding that this contour line in through here, that's 1.5 inches, and we have several places down here that have the potential for grabbing 3, 4, maybe 5 inches of rain on top of what's already come. And it is important to note, this area down here is this area that continues to remain in drought on the drought monitor. Now remember, this is a cumulative long-term statistic, so you're seeing months of drought in this area being reflected. The recent rainfall that's come through here is not really showing the offset from the previous month. So that heavy rain going right on top of that region, which means we should see some major improvement in the drought situation there once this is done. Okay, how about some model analysis? GFS left, European right. We're picking this up later today into tonight. Here comes the second big surge of moisture into parts of the Midwest, out of the south. You can see the European model is a bit more widespread on the precipitation. This is the third surge here on Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon and evening. This is the one that finally presses into the southeast as the snow moves into the Four Corners states. And then what you're going to see after that is things kind of calm down here, and they target the Pacific Northwest. So as that snow moves through on the northern side of this, the rain into New England, not a whole lot comes after that. I guess I forgot. Shoot. There was one more push. I thought it was a little bit farther in the forecast here. There's one more push, well resolved by the models, that comes in on Saturday morning. Then it gets calm. Ready? After that one goes through. Now, I know you'd probably like me to stop and show you exactly where I think the snow is going to be. And I cannot tell you how difficult of a forecast this is given how much mild air is in place. So I will rock back and forth over it just to show you again. I apologize, I forgot there was one more system coming through here. But we do need to pay attention Saturday into Sunday for the risk of snow. It's in both models in this area. There could be enough cold air to kind of bring that in. We'll look at probabilities in a moment to get an idea. Okay, now we get into that drier time period. Look at this. All the flow goes into British Columbia. This is when the jet comes in and just splits and does that. So it leaves everyone here in the middle just out of the flow. But we will target this region. And then at the very end of this animation, ready? This is Tuesday the 30th. February 1st is there. And getting into the second. Look at what happens. Look, especially the European solution. That's the beginning of what could be a very active start to the month in the West. Okay, let's do some probabilities here because I think it's going to be key to understanding that snow and the rain. Who's dry? This is the chance of getting less than 1/100th of an inch of moisture in the next 10 days. So there's that triangle that I'm so worried about. If we then step this up to probability of getting less than 1/2 inch, it of course grows substantially. And the reason for that is that split flow. But who's going to be wet on this? Well, this is the chance of 1 inch in the next 10 days. Very, very wet, as you know, in the near term here. And then coming into California, here's the chance of 2 inches, and here's the chance of 4. So the wettest is going to be here in coastal parts of the Pacific Northwest and also down here in parts of the South. Let's flip this over to try to see if we can see if the models agree at all on that snow from that system coming in this weekend. And so we go to winter. Let's just look at the chance of 3 inches. So what it is showing is we need to watch here and then into New York and the rest of New England for the best chance at getting at least 3 inches. And maybe on the northern side of these surges, we could get some snow there as well, possibly into Indiana and Ohio as well. So this is what's tricky about that weekend system coming through. But what will be fascinating to watch is, let's just jump this way up to 1 foot. No, let's go 24 inches. What I want to know is watch the Sierra Nevada as I go from day 10 out to day 15. So the probabilities here getting 2 feet of snow or more, maybe 36 inches or more, start to really increase once we get out there to the 2nd of February to the 7th of February. That is the new target area to watch most carefully. Okay? From here, let me show you what it looks like on the height map. February 2nd, look at this elongated trough that's expected to stretch from Alaska, almost the Chukchi Sea, down here to California. And the winds will be screaming on the southern side of it. Here's the ridge setup. Now watch this. As we go from February 2nd to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I like this. Now if we could just displace this ridge a bit farther east and build in more ridging into Alaska, then the effectiveness of this trough would really just rocket, low pressure systems out of the Four Corners states right into the central United States, which they eventually reach the east. But that is going to be the time period to watch. February 2nd through about February 7th, that could really get cranking here, bringing systems across the United States. Now, that, of course, is out there in week 2, and I want to show you some of the new data that was just released by the Climate Prediction Center yesterday evening. Their risk from the 30th to the 5th, they've now put out a high risk in this area for heavy precipitation and a slight risk all the way here. And you can also see the slight risk down here across the south. That's the heavy precip side of it. What about the snow side of it? High risk, look at that, for heavy snow in the Sierra Nevada, Klamath Mountains, and then much of the Intermountain West. This will be absolutely critical to the success of the new water year to have this come through. And then finally, I want to show you the risk of the high winds. They've got a moderate risk along the coast. Of course, you're getting the extension of the jet there, so that translates down into lower atmosphere winds, and then a slight risk throughout most of the western states. So this is what that jet extension is going to be capable of doing when we see it out there, but it's still days away. So we'll have a lot to talk about over the coming days. All right, week 2. Just take a look at the models. I've already shown you the European, but it's there in the GFS, and it is certainly there in the CPC forecast. So this is the type of time period that the western states use every year to kind of, it's usually just a week or two that comes in and just sets up the entire remainder of winter and then spring and summer the following. So this will be critical to the success of the water year in the west. We'll have to watch it carefully. On the temperature side of it, we're just watching that frost line creep back to the north. Of course, it's out of the west, at least the low-lying areas in the west. And here's what our high temperatures are going to do. So this is today's highs, playing forward to tomorrow and Thursday. 50s and 60s possibly here in the Ohio Valley. Very mild down here across parts of from the mid-Atlantic to the southeast. And then we just play forward into Friday, very warm east. Saturday, getting into Sunday. I know you see some cooler, but this is just a few degrees cooler than average, but very, very warm across the northern tier of the U.S. And the models agree that day 5 through 10, some of the warmest conditions of winter coming through here. Again, compared to average, while the cold air gets stored in Alaska and Greenland and the Canadian archipelago. And this is day 10 through 15. That will be the transition time. Watch Alaska. If during this time period we start to see a dislodging of this cold air and it starts to move in this direction, guess what that'll get used by? The jet coming in and making the turn as this warmth goes here, that's the right setup to just deliver in the midsection of the country. So that's what I'll be paying attention to, keeping a very close eye on it. Now, when does that cold air get there, and can it get timed with that February 2nd to February 7th change in the pattern? It could, but do we have a shot at bringing in some longer duration cold? My narrative hasn't changed from yesterday. If the MJO just lives here for a while, no. If it breaks out, yes. If it breaks out into phase 8 and 1, then sure, there'll be a good shot at cold air in February in the midsection of North America. So that'll be what we'll have to watch. I can't really add much more to my discussion about it yesterday, though, because there's just not a whole lot of new information. So we're waiting. We're just waiting to see the patterns start to evolve. So what I'm going to do for these last slides is tell you about South America and then tell you about Australia. For the last 30 days, we've had several places in here picking up a lot of rain. When you start to see this shading representing 300 millimeters, that's 12 inches of rain. Now, what you notice is there's been some places that have really gotten a lot of rain, and then parts of the central growing areas like Mato Grosso do Sul over toward Parna, Sao Paulo, there's several places down here that have been missed. So heavier rains north, heavier rains in Argentina, but a bit of a miss in the middle, which led me to look at the new NDVI data. So I picked off Mato Grosso, Goiás, Minas Gerais, up to Bahia and Tocantins, these areas. And you note that right now the NDVI values through mid-January are sitting just a hair above the climatological average. Last year was way up there. That was the major growing area a year ago. So let me take these off. And what I want to do here, sorry it's a bit slow, take these all off, and then I want to take you down to southern and central Brazil. So let's include Sao Paulo in this as well, and Santa Catarina, which is here, and then finally, there we go, Rio Grande do Sul. Now note, look at the envelope. That tells you where things should be going. This is the time period where things are looking greener, greener, greener. And what happened is we had a peak in NDVI here, and since then for these areas it's come back down. A year ago it was lower. That's the yellow line there. But still, this southern growing area, which was so wet early, its NDVI values have kind of hovered back toward average. That's important to note. But here's the crazy thing about all of this. Sorry, when I click, I have to move away while it loads so it gets rid of the little box. Let me take these off here, I apologize. Because I'm about to do Argentina. There we go. Now let's start right up here and just zip. Jeez. There we go. Ready? Santa Fe, Entre Rios, Buenos Aires, which is here. Can you see the graph at the bottom? Look what it's doing. Come on, give me Buenos Aires. There we go. This website's a little finicky. In Cordoba. That's most of Argentina's growing area. Look at that. That is where the NDVI value is right now. And a year ago, we were in the basement. So this is a huge change. Now, if we look down into Argentina for the last month, look at the rains. I mean, this has been almost ideal. Not too wet, but plenty. And if you think about what it's going to do in the future, well, it's cooler there now. But there is some concern that once we get out there past day 10, we start to warm back up quite a bit. So maybe some of the week 2 forecast is 4, 5, 6 degrees above average. And it is summer down there, so we need to pay attention to that. And why it's important is because over the next 10 days, I don't have a whole lot of rain coming to Argentina. Now, most of this, at least the next 7 days, are not hot and is dry. But day 7 through 10 is going to start to really see a warm up here. But I'm not worried about it destroying the crop. What continues to be my concern is the wetter conditions we have across the north. We have some places in here that are expecting to pick up 4+ inches of rainfall, more than 100 millimeters of rain. And if we look out there longer term, there's your next week. Yeah, there's a little bit of drier weather that comes in to start February, but the models just keep wanting to return wetter conditions throughout most of February here, which I think just could be a delay. Could be a delay on the speed of harvest. Now we know the first planted stuff is getting out quick, right? That's the early planted stressed crop. It's coming out quick. It's just the remainder of the crop. How fast does it come out? How quickly do we plant safrinha? So to finish this up and give you some international view on the weather here, this is just a 10-day outlook across the planet. And what I want to do is focus in on Australia. Look how wet things are in Australia. Right now, there's a tropical cyclone here spinning, and yes, it does look like for us in North America it's going in the wrong direction, but that's due to the Coriolis effect in the southern hemisphere. And there's another one right here, a big one. And if you look over the next 10 days, that one's expected to come right through Queensland, hit northern parts of like New South Wales, and while this one strolls through Western Australia here, we're looking at locally very, very heavy rainfall. Whoops, sorry, I meant to go back to this one. So some places easily picking up 4, 5, 6 inches of rain as each of these two tropical systems stall out here in the middle part of Australia. Temperature-wise, though, just taking a look at a couple of things, that's going to start to cool temperatures back off in Australia after being so hot. But my story across the rest of North America, watch Greenland, watch Alaska. Okay, that's going to be the key. And I got one last thing for you about Australia. This is not typical El Nino behavior for Australia to be this wet. These are month-to-date precipitation anomalies. And I just stressed this because I made a big deal yesterday about how I think El Nino is going to fade, and it's going to be critical. And if there's one spot on the planet that almost probably felt as though El Nino didn't happen, it would be our friends in Australia because of how wet this whole summer time period's been for them. Okay, that's all I got for you today. I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow morning. Have a good one. Thanks.